Hello, I'm Jim Miller. I'm here with Reggie Turner, Andy Overton, and Terrence Moore. The Flipside starts right now. Welcome to the show. Well, the Washington Examiner had an article recently that said the federal debt held by the public will exceed GDP next year. Reggie, you are probably the most financially savvy of all of us in terms of markets and all of those things. What does that mean? I mean, we've heard about that for a long time, that that's a bad thing. Why is it a bad thing? Why is it a bad thing? What are your thoughts?
Well, if our debts are growing faster than our economy, that means we're not going in the right direction. Okay. And our debts are at the highest levels ever. And, you know, the disappointing thing is that the GOP has prided itself on being the party of debts and deficits.
Right.
And
they haven't shown that much, have they?
Right. And I think if you look at the timing of the tax cuts in the economic cycle, I don't think it was a wise move for that to happen. You know, it was proven that most of the tax cuts went to stock buybacks, not reinvested within the community. So that has hurt us. And then on the back end of that, then you have a pandemic where we have to flood money into the economy to save us. So you have a confluence of those two things, and the spending that our federal government is doing, and it's putting us in a bad situation. Yeah.
So, Andy, we do have a pandemic. In 2008, when President Obama took over, we had basically a market meltdown. All very justifiable reasons to infuse cash into the market. But now we're paying for it, and our kids are going to pay for it. Is that, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think anybody can actually see what's going to happen tomorrow, the next day, or in 50 years. We can only do our best guess. I think the pandemic and the coronavirus has set us in a pathway for some pretty crazy economic times. I am no expert like Reggie is, but what I can say is that we're going to feel the effects of what's happening now, as well as the effects of what has happened in 2008 on for decades to come. This is not going to go away tomorrow, even if we do have a vaccine. I think we're going to be seeing it in our economy for a really long time, well into our kids' lives and possibly into our grandchildren's lives.
Terrence, I've heard some economists suggest, or actually one, I'll be clear on that, as that this is almost a false economy because we've injected so much cash into the economy, we really aren't seeing the impact of what COVID is doing to us, or it's not as obvious. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, there's always been questions about the GDP, if that calculation even makes sense anymore anyway. So, and we've done some things as far as, you know, injecting cash into the economy as well that has created kind of a curtain over what it really looks like. And these are problems that stem back well before 2008, some of the decisions we made. COVID has shine the light on things, especially coming to the digital age. So a lot of consumers aren't spending as much money as well. And it's also forced some change in habits that we were transitioning to anyway, but it happened in an accelerated rate over the last few months. So you talk about a family that could spend $150 going out to a movie a night and now doing it from the couch for $5. So you have small businesses and also our middle class who are really hit by this pandemic as well, holding on to the money they had and shutting down their businesses that won't come back into the market at any time soon. So, you know, putting money into the market is a great Band-Aid, but it's going to, as Andy said, this is going to be an impact that we're going to see for generations.
Interesting. Reggie, the last time that we hit this level in terms of our position against GDP was during World War II. Prior to that, even during the Great Depression, we were only at about 40 or 50% of GDP. What do you make of that? I was frankly surprised by the Great Depression piece. I thought that at that point we would have infused money, and apparently we didn't.
Right. You know, I think if you look back to the previous administration or any time a Democrat has been in office, the way the barking is about debt and deficits, you would imagine that this would have been happening during those periods. But it did not. I look at this and it is It is hugely concerning. Also to couple with this, the Federal Reserve has committed that interest rates are going to stay low until through 2023. But again, economists are looking at this and making projections, but we as a country, in regards to our fiscal responsibility, is not heading in the right direction. And we have left ourselves really no wiggle room for the unexpecteds that could happen at any point in time, whether that's through natural disasters, the financial markets really having a price discovery and having a true downturn that is sharper than the quick recovery that we've had in the stock market.
So, if you look at the economic cycle, and it is a cycle, and we all hate the recession word, but the reality is that's part of our cycle.
Yes.
And if you look, pandemic notwithstanding, theoretically, we're due for a recession. How does this pandemic, how does this deficit piece impact that? Is it going to make it more likely? Is it going to make it deeper? What are your thoughts, anyone?
Timing. It accelerated everything. We're not as prepared. We're right off the heels of 2008 recession. And we haven't really bounced back the way we should have and put things in place and been more proactive in things that we should. And also, we're still a country that's importing, so many goods than we are exporting at this time. And that's something that we had to look at and change. And also, as far as digital, we have a complete digital environment that also was accelerated and a light was shined on during this time as well that we're not taking into consideration. And we don't even factor in digital spending into the GDP. So those are some things that we really need to adjust and plan for, that this pandemic has forced us to be unprepared.
So let me expand on that, because you just, maybe you said this before, but if you did, I just got it. You're telling me that in your view, the GDP may not be an accurate representation at this point?
Yes. Take, for instance, something like Netflix. Consumer spending on Netflix doesn't calculate into the GDP because it's a digital good. So those dollars don't come into calculate into that number anymore. Take something like Spotify, where you buy music. You buy $10 for a subscription. That's not in the GDP. It's a subscription when it used to be 100 CDs were $10 a pop. So those are those things that really changed, that we really haven't accounted for in that calculation, because we went to a more of a digital age. So I think we need to really look at the GDP and what it really takes into account. It also doesn't take into account volunteer work and some of the small businesses that are happening right from people's homes.
Interesting. Reggie, any thoughts on that?
No, he makes some excellent points in regards to, I think, as we head further into this digital age, there needs to be a re-examination of GDP, but just looking at it purely from the standpoint that our debts are exceeding GDP at this point is a troubling statistic.
Yeah, regardless of whether it's an accurate measurement, the fact of the matter is it's been with us for a long time. Interesting. All right, up next, Maryland adds 24,000 jobs in August. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. So Maryland reported an addition of 24,200 jobs in August. Here's the key figure. Maryland unemployment, according to the statistics, it's at 6.9%. First question I got to get on the table, does anybody believe that? I mean, is it just me, or are we miscounting this?
Well, we could, or they're just temporary seasonal jobs, or we're just bringing back a few folks because our businesses are reopening. What we don't know is whether those businesses will remain open and what will happen when the season changes. We're still 6.9% in the hole, right, for unemployment. While we may have added 24,000 jobs, we have a long way to go before we can consider that at all stable. And I think that's the number we have to look at, and that's the jobs report we have to really analyze, is to figure out who has these jobs, how much we're paying folks, and how stable that employment is. We could see this rise again in the next couple months.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I agree. I think it's a kind of a knee-jerk number at this point in time. It's a feel-good number. It's great to see, and I think it inspires some kind of hope. I hope it trends upward. But we opened up jobs and we opened up businesses, and a lot of those jobs, you think about it, were jobs that our college kids used to occupy during the summer. and coming back and opening up, and people who are looking for jobs fairly quickly jumped into those jobs as well. So it's hard to believe, but it's hopeful, but we'll see what the long-term numbers look like.
You mentioned in the previous segment about the fact that you thought the GDP measurement may not be as accurate as it may need some revision.
Right.
Does the same happen here? Are we miscounting? Are we? And I don't know what factors go into creating the unemployment rate, but I know ADP has a part in it, and arguably they don't service a lot of small businesses. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. As we become a larger nation, there's a lot of undocumented jobs that are out there that people actually occupy that doesn't go into the employment rate. There's a number of small businesses that operate, that make profit, but are considered sole proprietorship, so they're not really considered as employment. There are a number of people with multiple jobs, who hold multiple sole propriety and do side jobs as well, that really doesn't factor into that number. So there's a lot of variance into adjusting that number, and as technology actually accelerates as well, it makes more jobs that are actually happening from home.
So Reggie, from an unemployment standpoint, one of the articles that I had read recently was that one of the things that may, forgive the term, save our bacon a little bit in this process is the fact that we have this baby boomer generation, many of which who are old enough to retire but just haven't because they'll hang on for another couple years and get things moving. There's a theory that they are trending now more towards okay, I'm out. What impact do you think that might have on this, if any?
Well, obviously that'll transition the workforce. I'm seeing it in my business. I am seeing clients that have been afraid of COVID and have reevaluated their circumstances, and they're taking the opportunity to retire if they can. So I'm seeing that transition. I really can't speak to what that means overall, but that is a trend that I am seeing personally. But the two things that have jumped out to me in this article is that we're still about 175,000 jobs in the hole.
Yep.
And the majority of the jobs that were added were leisure and hospitality. Yeah. Those are two troubling things to me in regards to kind of looking at that, because I believe if we're looking at leisure and hospitality, in my mind that would lead to the seasonality that Terrence was talking about in regards to the job market. And the troubling thing is that we're starting to see COVID rates go up in the surrounding counties. I see that Frederick County is seeing an increase. I see Allegheny County is seeing an increase. So will there be another shutdown or slowdown of the economy that will send us right back in the other direction in the short term?
Yeah, not to mention those leisure jobs are probably more like minimum wage or somewhere around their jobs rather than the high-paying jobs that we need and want in our community.
Absolutely.
Andy, what say you?
Yeah, what I think is going to be interesting is whether the numbers move or not. We're going to see it within a microcosm of our community, because we're going to see teachers who have been teaching for 30 years retire because they're not going to want to be able to face, say, a COVID environment because they are older, talking about our older population. We're going to see nurses. We're going to see a shortage in healthcare. We're going to see a shortage of workers in education. And I think what's happening with this pandemic is that it's forcing people to consider, do I work or do I keep my health? And if that is the case, we're going to see a shortage in some areas that I think will impact individual communities, whether we see a bump in the numbers or not. But we will see that in small towns, we'll see that in counties, and at some point there's going to be a call for more nurses and more teachers and more laborers because folks are retiring or they simply cannot go back to work. And I think that's the number to pay more attention to.
Yeah. The other thing that struck me, and it wasn't directly in this article, but CARES Act funding.
Yes.
Have to spend it by December 31st, right? What happens then? We've already seen, and I know President Trump has put some executive orders in place, some of which I agree with, others I don't, but regardless, he has. There's this $3 trillion package that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is trying to put through that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. How many jobs are being held together but by the fact that this CARES Act funding is still in place and we still have that money to spend?
I think from a large standpoint, economists are saying that we have seen the majority of the effect of those funds and it's dissipating. And I think that's showing up in volatility in the stock market as of recent, as opposed to especially what we're seeing this month. So, that's why it's really important to Congress to come to some agreement in regards to additional funding, because people are hurting. And, we can look across the nation and seeing where, large employers are laying off and more small businesses are going out of business.
And a lot of these jobs will never come back. A lot of companies are realizing and how to work more leaner. They have work from home, so they're closing office spaces. People are getting comfortable doing twice as much work for the same pay.
Yep.
So those jobs may never come back, and think about the jobs of cleaning offices and office spaces. Those jobs aren't coming back because people won't be occupied, and we see vacant office spaces all across every small town, big city right now.
And in the larger office spaces, think about the restaurants that are at the bottom of those office spaces that now no longer have a constituency to serve at lunch or dinner. So there's a lot of one step out, even on the technology side, from the security companies that service those offices, the guard services, the parking deck attendants, all of those people. It's going to be, this is going to be a huge paradigm shift for us.
Yeah, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I agree with both of you, and we can keep reiterating that over and over again. But if I knew what was going to happen on November 3rd, then I would know probably what was going to happen on December 31st. I don't think anybody has a crystal ball. Yeah. And I think folks are also kind of holding their breath, trying to get through this political season to find out what is next for this country. And I think that would put a big power play into what's going to happen on December 31st with the CARES Act. I think folks are trying to figure out where we're going to be on November 4th or January 20th. And I think that if we knew that, then we would, all be rich and millionaires and living someplace else. But I think it's unknown. So sure, I agree with both of you. I do. Yeah. I really hope that may be the case, and I hope that we can come to a resolution. But I don't know what's going to happen next week in our political sphere, much less on November 4th, December 31st, or obviously January 20th.
Yep. All right, up next, we have a potential replacement for former delegate, now Senator, Paul Quarterman. We'll talk about that after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. So the Republican Central Committee announced that Dr. Brenda Cham, I think that's the way you pronounce her name, will be the replacement that we are forwarding to the governor for his approval for our delegate Paul Quarterman, who's moving into the Senate. Andy, starting with you, what say you?
I think that if you are happy with the manner in which the Republican Central Committee has worked here in Washington County, you're thrilled by this appointment. And if you're not, then you're probably not okay with this appointment. I think some of the most disappointment should be from Shelley McIntyre, who has put in a ton of work here, I think, in the county. And personally, I was a little disappointed that wasn't an option, but I'm not on that committee. And once again, we have an appointed individual up in our Annapolis State House that wasn't voted on by, obviously, the residents. We've talked about that on the show here before.
We have.
So I think we've got a very freshman person who's got a lot to learn, and I'm hoping that she can deliver on some promises. I guess we will only see and see how she can be mentored.
Okay. Reggie, what say you?
I am pleasantly shocked. She was not my pick in regards to how the Republican Central Committee normally does business.
So when you say she wasn't your pick, not about your personal choice, but how you thought they would pick.
Right.
Okay. Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
So I was pleasantly surprised by that. I think that, if they're looking to shake things up, that they've done so in a very big way. Her selection is historic. I think that, for African Americans, that's something to celebrate, whether they agree with her, all the way politically or not. In regards to Brenda, she is very community-minded. She's a champion of the Jonathan Street community. She attends church there. But for everything that she does not have in experience, I believe she makes up with genuineness and integrity. And I'm excited to see what she's going to be able to accomplish. I just know that, you know, the Washington County delegation is going to have a look that many in Annapolis have not seen before. And I believe that she will be able to move and speak with a genuine voice on some issues that we have not as a community been able to before.
Okay. What say you, Terrence?
Personally, I like the pick. And Shelley McIntyre Councilwoman McIntyre has done a great job, but she also was appointed, you know, and 3 of the names that were submitted were all appointed and never voted on. That's where I struggle with right now, especially as we pushed for people to register to vote and tell people, everyone their vote counts. And we've seen so many people in our area be appointed into positions where your vote really didn't put them there. So I think there's some opportunity for education around that appointment system, because I don't think everyone understands it or understood it as we went through it, 4 times over the last 4 years. So I think there's some opportunity there. As far as Dr. Brenda Cham, she is great for education, and that's my concern right now. And her work in the private sector, her background in education is going to be necessary. I think it's necessary for developing our workforce, which is a big challenge right now. It's necessary for addressing all of the glaring gaps that we've seen in our education system that hasn't really been adjusted for, you know, decades, and really needs to be revisited as we integrate technology in and integrate what social distancing looks like for our children and what the equity looks like around with technology entering into our education system. So I hope she can bring some of that as well, because I think education is going to play a role in everything that's going to pretty much come to the table or come across her desk in the next few months or years to come.
Okay. So let's talk about where we think she will have the most impact in Annapolis. I'm going to go back to you, Andy. I know I don't know that you said whether you liked the pick or didn't like the pick. You said that, which I'm not asking you to say that, but where do you think she can have an impact in Annapolis? What can she bring to the table from your perspective?
Yeah, well, she's got a lead based on what she knows, and that is in special education, right? So if that isn't her focus, I think that she would have a big learning curve. And since we're throwing, you know, she's been appointed, right? And the assembly comes back sometime in January. And I think that she would have a few months to learn as much as she can, but where she's going to be most effective is talking about the things that she knows and that she's studied and that she has a doctorate in. So I think you're right that if she can do the most impact, at least in the first few months, is in education, and let's see if that works. You know, I've had some reservations about some of the answers that she had in her council forums, and I think that only time will tell. I think she's going to be pushed. I think this is a big appointment. I think this is something bigger than, from her history, what she's had before. So either she's going to rise to that challenge and she's going to talk about the information and her knowledge that she has, or she's not. So again, I hope she represents us in a way that really pushes our education levels up. I hope that she keeps our students in mind, but only time will tell when she gets on the floor.
So my thought process has been so far, and I have not found out a lot about her yet. I'm hoping she'll join us on the show to talk to us about her background and her plans and her thoughts. But here's what I'm assuming. Here's the assumption that I hope will become reality. She's got a doctoral degree. That tells me that she has got a propensity to learn. And I think at some point we're all political neophytes, or anybody that enters the political arena, and she's going to have a learning curve the same as Andy Serafini or Chris Shank or anybody else that's ever run for public office for the first time or been appointed, to your point. But I hope that based on her propensity to learn, based on her advanced education, that she'll be able to use the knowledge she has in her specialty and expand it out and apply it. Because let's face it, there are things you can apply regardless. You know, my background is technical. I shouldn't be making videos for a living, but well, here I am. There are things you can apply to other fields. Mm-hmm. Is that a reasonable thought process?
Absolutely. There's transferable skill sets that helps anyone in any position. That's what we look for in leaders. We want to be able to be, one, to rely on what they hear from the people, and two, rely on the subject matter experts that they have around them. So to do that, you got to be humble, and you have to have some transferable skills around communication, which is necessary as well. Wanting to learn and being able to learn is huge in a leader that we should be looking for as well.
So you had mentioned about the fact that, and Terrence, you did as well, that a number of our representatives at this point in the state and local offices have been appointed by the Republican Central Committee. Mm-hmm. 0 appointed by the Democratic Central Committee, because let's face it, we're a pretty conservative red community, right? And I have thought of that as a problem as well, but I don't know what the alternative is. I mean, that's the system as we have it. What are the alternatives? How do we get around that? Is there anything that we can point to that the Republican Central Committee, from a process standpoint, has done outside of the scope of what they were charged to do?
No, it's the process. That's the way that works. And I will remind folks that obviously people vote in their Central Committee members. So
right, exactly.
There is a voting process, and they represent the people in their party. Where that loses, of course, is the third-party candidates, right? They don't have that shot, and that's a whole different argument. But the point is, that's the process. That's what we have, and they're playing within the rules. That's the way that works. But it is worthy of note that they have appointed a fair amount of individuals. And those people haven't run for re-election yet. We'll find out on November
some
3rd.
of them have, but yeah, there are new appointees in office today.
Yeah, and fair, exactly.
Yeah. But the other thing, what has bothered me, and if I were to point to anything in that process that caused me some level of grief, it is the fact that they seem to fill one vacancy and create another, and it seems like we're moving pieces around the chessboard. And creating more vacancies that then they can appoint to as well. And I guess, and the appointee here does not create that other vacancy, which, quite frankly, and we'll get into this in a minute. Not that I want to end this segment on a bad note, but I have been very disappointed in the Republican Central Committee in terms of their Facebook posts and their social media, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But this, in my view, I think they genuinely see her as the best candidate. I don't think that there were, in my view, and based on what I read, I don't think there was any other reasoning there. I hope that to be the case. Go ahead. Terrence is going to disagree with me here.
It's politics. It's definitely politics, and as Andy pointed out, Councilwoman McIntyre was a strong candidate as well, and I think speaking in some groups, many thought she was going to be the favorite to actually take that position. Bob
Brucci was arguably a strong candidate as well.
Absolutely. So I guess is what you were looking for. And we are in an environment right now where every decision we make is being scrutinized, and there's been some public outcry. So whether you could say it was a pick to pander, or was it a pick to justify, or remediate some of the things that have been done and have been said, and some of the bad choices? We don't know. We weren't in those rooms. So in going back to the appointment point that you said, I think it's education we got to look at as well. So it's not that the process is broken, but everyone should know the process when they go to vote. So they should know what the outcome or what the possibility is, something that can happen, even when they elect their Central Committee members. And do they truly know that these individuals will be representing them, and if there is a shift, that they will be picking someone else? So whether Brenda or anyone else is in that position, we got to understand as well that though they're Republicans, their constituents is everyone. So they should be representing us all. Does it always look like that? Maybe not. So I really think education is important right now to educate our voters, or what it looks like, what the impact of their vote actually is. And so when things like this don't seem so glaring to us, or seem like they're possibly manipulating a process which is in place for a reason.
Other thoughts on that?
I'll say this. I think Dr. Cham has the opportunity to prove them right. she has an excellent opportunity to prove them right, because she is in a unique place, even in her short time in politics in our community, where she may have said some things that did not align with other people in the community, and she was attacked for that. She was still open and willing to have a conversation and a dialogue. And she fostered a dialogue in a respectful manner. And in this era, that is unique. And I believe that she'll be able to take those skills to Annapolis and even work with folks that she don't absolutely agree with, but build relationships to win for Washington County. And I believe that she'll be able to do that in a position that other delegates have not been able to be because of her unique experience, you know, where she's attended school and her background.
Well, and I can't help but think her, again, her base of knowledge and the degree and everything would hopefully help her rise in her committee assignments and so forth, perhaps more quickly than others. Andy.
Yeah.
You're dying to say something. I want to hear
I'm going to push
too.
back on all this. So
all right,
I think I've served with Dr. Cham on the Washington County Commission for Women. She was my president. I took over after her. I've been on different forums. We've talked. So taking that away, if this is purely from a political strategic standpoint, take away the personality, taking away the friendship, you know, you put somebody in this position for these remaining years so that you can see what they can do, right? And if you don't like them, it's easy to replace them with a different candidate when they run in 2022. And there's no harm, no foul. You did your best, thanks so much. I think that the Central Committee has somebody else in mind in the next 2 years. And it's going to be, this is me, but if I was the political strategist, I would do this to shut everyone up. Let me be the first to say that we're going to bring the first African American delegate there. Great, wonderful. The Republican side did that. That's great. But I think that there's another candidate that they have in the wings, and I think that's the candidate they're going to push. What I hope is that Dr. Cham blows them away. I do. I hope that she represents my city, this city, in a way that makes it an obvious choice for 2022. But if she doesn't, the Central Committee, the Republican side, has lost nothing, because there's other candidates that I think they're pushing up. And we'll see what happens. But she's got to work extra hard. She's got to be absolutely perfect. She cannot falter. And because of that, I think that's stacking the deck against her. Do I think she can do it? Sure. She's intelligent enough, she's smart enough, she can reach across the aisle. Again, I don't always agree with everything she says. I don't necessarily like all the strategies and her perspectives, but that's the part of politics, right? If she fails, they've lost nothing. If she wins, they look like heroes. But I think she's a placeholder for right now for the Republican Central Committee.
The deck is definitely stacked up against her. She's the first for a reason, right?
Yeah.
But is she a placeholder in your view?
Possibly. Anything's possible. You know, strategy. Again, we are in our rooms. We don't know the strategy there. But again, I talked to Senator Quarterman yesterday, and we spoke about how difficult it was for him when he was appointed halfway through. He didn't know the players when he got down there. He didn't even know. He joked around and said, "I hadn't even found out where the bathrooms were in the building." So I even had to find the logistics of the buildings when I were down there. So she's going to have to do that when the new class of delegates that came in well before her are getting acclimated, who know the players, and she has to do it in the midst of coming off a pandemic. Right. So there's going to be a lot of things that's going to be going on down there where she's not going to be able to foster those relationships as easily as some others may have. So again, if she knocks their socks off and she blows it out the water, that's great. But yes, the deck is kind of stacked against her, over this next couple of years. So it's an uphill battle.
Reggie, placeholder? No placeholder.
See, this is tough for me because Andy was the one that said that she would get the spot, and that wasn't the choice that I thought that would be. And so it's kind of hard for me to go against Andy right now because she has this crystal ball magic going on.
Sometimes it's all
and I'm probably going to get her to pick my fantasy football team this weekend, but that's another story.
You're welcome.
I'm still hopeful because I think that there's many times throughout history when we as African Americans are given our first shot, and it's not genuine in regards to us receiving our first shot. There's always an agenda there, but I'm really hopeful for her based on who she is.
Yeah. I am hopeful as well, and I had not considered. I think your point is very valid, and it could be the case. My belief, my hope is that it's not the case.
Of course, it's all of our hopes.
And
we want success.
Yeah, I assume good intent from the Republican Central Committee, from the Democratic Central Committee, from everyone that's in an elected office. I would say that given what we've seen recently with the Republican Central Committee and the number of appointees they had, anyone that is smart enough to vote needs to look at those positions with a lot more
they play an integral part in our election process.
They really do.
Clearly.
Because things are moving around today more so than ever. While we're on that, let's talk about the central committees. And I'm going to start this one out, and then I'll shut up and let the rest of you say something. I am, and I've said this many times on this show, I am a registered Republican. I don't always vote Republican. However, I appreciate the fact that there's a Republican Central Committee representing my interest. My concern is that some of the memes, some of the political posts that I've seen on their site, and quite frankly the Democratic site, and I'll point to two specific examples, don't represent me. And that's a problem for me. I saw a post a couple of weeks ago that basically had what I read into it was that Democrats condone violence. Emily Keller is a Democrat, therefore Emily Keller condones violence. Now, they didn't say those words, but that's what I got from reading the article. I know Emily pretty well, and she and I are probably on the opposite ends of the continuum on many political issues. But I don't, in my heart of hearts, believe for 1 second that she has anything but good intentions in what she's doing as a councilwoman today and as a mayoral candidate for tomorrow. On the Republican side, or on the Democratic side, Bob Brucci had an open mic accident with some kind of a call, and he used a flowery term over his shoulder, trying to get someone not to speak while he was in the middle of this process, and it's all over it's on the Democratic Central Committee. The other thing that bothers me is that on both the Republican and Democratic Central Committee pages, I found items on there that either Snopes or whoever they get to fact check them said, wait a minute, we don't 100% agree with this, or it's out of context, or whatever the case may be. Again, in my view, these central committees are representatives of their constituents, in my case, a Republican constituent, and they need to make that real. They can't, they need to post stuff that is fact. They need to, and if it is opinion, you need to make sure that it's clearly labeled as an opinion, and you shouldn't be reposting some of this garbage that you see out on social media that is just plain dead wrong. Comments?
I follow both pages, and
as do I.
With the Republican Central Committee, my biggest issue is that they take the worst of things happen nationally and then tag it to politicians or Democrats in our community. They take what's happening in Seattle and then say, well, if you elect a Democrat, then that's what's going to happen in our community. And I feel like they spend so much time posting memes and inflammatory things about what's happening nationally, and they pay no attention to what's happening locally. We have 27% poverty rate here. They're not talking about that. They're not talking about the fact that we've had Blue Lives Matter rallies, Black Lives Matter rallies, and there has not been any violence in our community. But they're trying to associate the things that are happening in other places here, and they spend no time really addressing the issues. And I just think it does a disservice, and it doesn't broaden their tent any at all.
It's dangerous. It really is. We're a divided community in many ways, and this just adds to it. And it also paints our community in a bad light, because we're not the only one that see those posts around our area. Yeah. Others from the outside see those posts, and it creates a bad picture, especially when we're trying to recruit businesses and residents to come into this community. So I think it's behavior that it also sets a standard for those who follow that think that is okay as well. And that creates more of that divisive behavior that we're seeing on Facebook. It's all about marketing at this point in time. And we're not talking about, topics and positions that are really going to change your lives. Give us plans. Tell me what you're going to do when you get elected. Tell me why your candidate is the best, instead of tearing down the opposing candidate. We've got away from that. We don't even have live debates to talk about issues anymore. And social media has given people a platform where, the meme has become news. And unfortunately, there are people who take that as law and they run with it. And then they repeat it, or they repost it, or they share it. And that impact is only does a detriment to our community and our children. This is why we're struggling and we're begging people to register to vote. And you don't. That's an impact that's lasting, where people are walking away from the voter booths, and they have to be accountable for that, and they have to see the error in their ways.
Andy?
Yeah, so I will remind everyone that the mayor and the city council race is nonpartisan.
Exactly.
So, and as much as I've looked at that, right, I think it should be, because the issues that we deal with on a very local level are specific to our community. And I think when our central committees, and I've seen it more on the Republican side, but then again, I'm a lifelong left-handed Democrat, so maybe it's my bias coming through, I'll admit it. But if we can't talk about the issues that our candidates are running about and for, instead of posting memes about what people said on hot mics, although that is fact, I was in that forum. I was in that forum. I know exactly what happened. I saw it with my own eyes. And that slip up from Mayor Brucey occurred. I was in it live. Now, so if you want to report on facts, great, then you can make your own opinion. But this is a nonpartisan election, so let's reach across the aisle and start talking about the actual positions of the candidates and the plans that these folks will have for our community moving forward. It's so surface. Let's get down into the nitty-gritty and ask the really hard questions. Like, what will you do with our stadium? Is it even alive? How are we going to fight the opioid epidemic more than what we're doing now, since it's rising? How are we going to come out of this economic downturn? Those are the questions I want to see answered. And quite frankly, if our central committees can't get to that, we are too partisan, and that is what's killing us. And I agree with you. It's dividing that vote. It's nonpartisan for a reason. Vote for the candidate that best represents your interests and will help you in your own life, no matter who that is, Democrat or Republican, because it's neither for the city council and the mayor,
right.
And we've got to get back to that.
Well, and the reality is that the local politicians are not going to have input into the big issues that divide Republicans. Bob Brucey is not going to impact Roe versus Wade.
Right.
Period. He just isn't.
But there is conversation, obviously, about what you can impact. So the question there is, what will you do with the Planned Parenthood clinic that is downtown? What will you do with, and that's things we can answer on. Those are the questions we have to ask.
Right.
Not Democrats equal rioting and Republicans equal racism. I reject that notion. For our city council and our mayor and even our board of ed. Let's get back to the issues that affect our daily lives every single day and ask those hard questions and get away from the name calling, because it's not doing us any good.
Right.
I'm going to give you the last word on that because it was a really good last word. Up next, Fast Five. Stay tuned. Welcome to Fast Five, where our four panelists talk about 5 topics in 7 short minutes. Let's talk first about the census. And Governor Hogan is urging Marylanders to complete their census form. We all on board with that one? What do we think?
Absolutely. Through my work on the Maryland Commission of African American History and Culture, that's been a focus of ours, of encouraging people to do the census. I think one of the most poignant things I heard about that is, the census every 10 years is a family snapshot. And we need to look at it that way, especially looking at COVID and different things that are happening in our communities. Resources are being decided based on those numbers. So it is very important that we complete the census.
Andy?
I'd like to be counted in my relationship as well. I think that includes being seen. And I think anytime we can complete a form that allows us to get more money and more services for our folks here, I say we do it.
Terrence?
I think even our numbers of where our position is, how many return census forms, speaks highly to how well we did as a state during COVID. I think we need to kind of communicate that as well and tie that to the census and drive those numbers up.
All right. Maryland state lawmakers urge passage of legislation aimed at reducing healthcare disparities. Andy, what say you?
Yeah, well, I mean, anything that we can do to reduce healthcare disparities, and I think COVID obviously has just really played a big snapshot in that. It's always been there, right? But now we're bringing it up to the forefront, and if this gets Annapolis to take a look at that and allows us to do good and help reduce that, then why wouldn't we? Let's make it happen.
All right. Reggie?
I think we're headed in the right direction, but I think there's some more work and study to be being done.
Sure.
I know that Governor Hogan vetoed this before, and I'm looking at a different article that I was reading through the Tax Foundation, and that apparently for restaurants and bars, there's a 2-year delay in regards to this. But again, we still don't know the effects and what it's going to take for us to come out of COVID. And this may not be the way to tackle it, but I believe the discussion is worthy.
All right. Terrence?
I agree. I think it's a great concept. I am concerned about the grant portion of it because we see some of the issues that we've had with grants and who applies, how they apply, and being aware of when you can apply. So I think if we can kind of get into the details and clean that up, I think it'd be something that's worth going forward.
All right. Here's a surprising one of the week. U.S. household wealth hits a record even as the economy has indications of problems. Andy, what say you?
Yeah, I think that's in the, top 3% of wealth. I think that there's still a huge gap in between folks and our jobs coming back, obviously, in that top third, where jobs are not coming back in the bottom 2/3. And I think this is the exact same thing. So wealth may be coming back to households whose jobs they can go back to. I don't see that happening in the lower socioeconomic statuses. And I think that's the issue. And I think this article and this statistic was a bit misleading in that.
Terrence?
I agree. Very misleading and kind of insulting to a lot of people who are sitting home, without jobs. And you see some of these numbers where the wealth of 2/3 of our population has 50% of our wealth, and 1% of our population has 31% of our wealth. Those are glaring numbers right now, and where we sit today.
All right. Reggie?
I think this is another example, and I agree with them, but this is increasing the gap between the have and the have-nots. Because those with disposable income through, enjoying things digitally at home, as you spoke about in earlier segments, are able to save more money. But those that are living paycheck to paycheck or below or at the poverty line, they're not enjoying the benefits of this. And again, with the stimulus that was put into the economy dissipating, those families are struggling. So this is, the headline really doesn't speak to the trauma that's happening beneath the numbers.
Okay. TikTok, the deal is in trouble. Terrence, what do you know about that one?
At this point, it's going back and forth. It just seems like a power struggle, which is going on right now. And when we look at technology, I would say look at the underlying fact. Why is it so important to have the power over TikTok? And I think that goes back to what we talked about in earlier segments of the power of social media, of influencing and influence our voters. So I think it's control of a valuable tool.
But arguably, the ownership thing is an issue. I don't think anyone expected that the Chinese company would retain a majority ownership, and that seems to be where it's going. Is that true? It is,
but it's been said that we're not going to allow that. As a country, it's stated by the president that we don't want that. And once it becomes a private company, it's supposed to be change hands. But I don't know. If you can't agree upon it, then it's going to stay with the Chinese government.
Right. Reggie?
This is a news story that my daughters have been educating me on because they follow this closer than I do. And when the news came last week that TikTok was going to be banned in the U.S., there was an uproar in my household. I'll just say there's political posturing going on. I think it's dangerous to play this game with China because China could do the same thing against some U.S. companies. We'll see how this moves. But this very well may fade away in the next few months.
Interesting. All right, this is our TFS, or WTF, What the Flip Side segment. Michelob Ultra is planning on hiring a Chief Exploration Officer, CEO. That person will get paid $50,000 to explore U.S. national parks while, guess what? Drinking beer.
Yes.
Who's applying?
I have submitted my resume.
Have you? Okay.
And, you know, I highlighted my archaeological skills to see what that would add to this, and I am hopeful to hear back, because it is $50,000 plus expenses.
Mm-hmm. A place to stay.
So I'm all in on this one.
All right. Excellent. Andy?
Yeah, you skipped me on the TikTok, so here's what I'm going to say. That's okay. The only thing I'm going to say about TikTok is don't get distracted. There's a lot more to that story. All right.
Yeah, sure of it.
So I think the gap year between high school and college is about to get really interesting with $50,000 and all the beer that you can drink, and taking pictures and beautiful. I mean, this is a marketing ploy, and it's brilliant. I mean, why not get out into the open air, throw back a few beers? I don't even like beers. I'm not going to apply. It's all you. And take great pictures in beautiful places. What a fantastic opportunity for some 23-year-old kid who needs to go out and experience the world. I hope they get it.
All right. Terrence?
Or a 41-year-old man who wants a low-carb option to take his dog and family into the wilderness and drinking beer.
Apologies for making that all about the kids.
No, I think it's a great marketing ploy as well, and it ties in, health, fitness, and finance. $50,000 to enjoy life in this way. Why not?
Yeah.
And you're social distancing while you're doing so.
Right.
There you go.
I'm contemplating an application, but we'll see. That's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will like us on Facebook. We hope you will follow us on Twitter. We hope you will send us your comments and suggestions to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That's feedback@theflipsidetv.com. Most importantly, we hope you will join us again next week for another visit to the Flip Side. Good night.